Yeah, basically that's kind of the job. It's to, when somebody goes under contract and they're obviously hiring us to come in and, you know, I don't want to use the word find defects, but that's pretty much what we're being hired to do is find imperfections in the home. And, some people choose to not get a home inspection. I, think that's a terrible idea.
I agree with you.
We never really know what we're going to find. And that doesn't matter if the house is 6 days old, 6 months old, 6 years, or 60 years. We can find the same, defects in any of those, age homes. So, when you walk in a house, most people only see the pretty things.
Right.
It's oftentimes that I, point out a leak in a ceiling or something, and, they walk right past it during
right.
the, and you don't see it. And the realtor will say, well, I should have seen that. And you shouldn't have. That's what you guys are there, to pay me to do. You pay us to get on the roof, you pay us to get in the attic and crawl spaces and, to do these dirty things. But, to answer the question, I mean, basically the job is essentially, to educate a home buyer on what it is that they're getting ready to spend their money on. And potentially, hopefully they're not expensive costs to repair when we find stuff, but, sometimes it is. And sometimes we don't know all the answers, but,
right.
The idea is to identify a defect, tell them what it has caused or can cause, and then to tell them what type of contractor or, repair person should either look at it or repair it.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they're small expenses, and like I said, sometimes they're fairly large expenses, and we don't know what we're walking into.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, like it's, 6 years old, there's nothing wrong with it, and you get there and, you find some things that are wrong. Water leaks. Water is...
Water's the enemy.
Yeah, it's nobody's friend. And it goes for interior and exterior.
Yeah.
A plumbing leak on the inside can be just as bad as a roof leak on the outside.
Right.
So it's, determining that is difficult. And small things too, that we don't think a whole lot about, that, they go into a report and, oh, it's just smoke detectors, or it's just a carbon monoxide detector. And, it's just, but those are... They're
still important when you're buying a home.
Yeah, they're easy things, for a seller to correct. But, But they're missing, it's our job to note it.
Yeah.
And to tell them. So,
right.
But basically, to answer your initial question, the job is to educate people on what they're purchasing.
Yeah.
It's not to estimate the cost of the repairs per se, but it's...
Because you're an inspector, you're not a handyman.
Yeah, I mean, we can help, on the small stuff, we can...
Right.
It's this or that. When you get into a foundation, like, what's that going to cost me?
You're not a structural engineer,
right.
But you have those people to help?
Yeah, we have referral partners and people who are happy to, send out or give you the contact information, who would be happy to, come out and look at it. And, I'm hoping that it's not very often I have to refer a structural engineer.
Right,
yeah. When I was new, I probably did more than I do now, but in speaking to them and being, out on site and, you learn things and you kind of learn what's normal.
Right, yeah. I mean, and obviously structural engineers get involved when there's foundation issues.
Yeah.
Maybe attic issues? Is there significant attic issues?
So, a common one that we see is somebody put in an attic fan or an attic ladder, like a pull-down ladder, and they just go up there and they cut a truss in half.
Oh, wow.
And, it's been that way for 10 years. Well, it's still it's a structural defect. Those trusses are built on an engineered plan, and they're not designed to be
cut. So the house was built for those trusses to be there. And so
yeah.
if somebody cuts into them, then it's no longer as solid as it may have been at some point in time.
Yeah, those products are actually designed where the attic fan is designed to typically sit on top of the trusses.
Gotcha.
And the garage ladders are actually designed to go in between the trusses.
Right.
So, it's somebody, typically they're a handyman sometimes or a contractor.
Well, everybody's DIY these days, right?
Or
you can learn to do everything on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's just a piece of wood. I cut it.
Right.
But it's a truss. It's a structural problem. So, and, again, those aren't usually super difficult repairs, but it's got to come up in a report.
Yeah.
So
what does it mean when you say that the furnace tested, it works fine, but it's at the end of its estimated life.
Yeah, so that's part of our job is to identify if appliance is at or near the end of its useful life. And so, there's varying ranges on age. I use 15 to 18 years in my report for a gas furnace and a standard electric air conditioner. Electric furnaces have a little bit longer life, but that's one thing our clients are concerned about. We don't want them to get a call and you told me that it's fine, and
right.
A repair guy comes out and goes, well, it's 25 years old, it's past its life. So if it's in that 15 to 18 year range, you're getting close to it. We tell them it's getting near the end of its useful life.
Right.
If it's 25 years old, it's past its life expectancy, and what we'll typically recommend if it's operating, is to begin to budget for replacement. And from a seller's perspective, they're not going to replace them very often.
Yeah, right.
It's functioning.
Right.
It's
if
been
it
working.
Works. That's a big thing, though. A seller's going to tell you, if it's working, I'm not replacing it. But you've got a young couple buying their first house, and they're like, oh my gosh, what kind of expense am I going to have in 2 years?
Yeah, unfortunately, houses you're constantly putting money into them.
Right.
Right? So,
like children.
Yeah, at the very top of my report, I put in a little disclosure, and I call it the 1 to 3% rule. And I basically tell clients to budget 1 to 3% of their home's value for repairs and upgrades every year. And I think if you maintain that, even if you're putting 1% in per year, on a $300,000 house, it's theoretically $3,000 a year that you're putting into it. So if you take the cost of a new air conditioner as $3,000 to $4,000, it's really not a hefty. It's an expense, and it's a lot of money, but in comparison to the value of the home,
sure.
Right?
But you're not going to be surprised either, because you were a little advised that way in the beginning when you first got the house.
We tell people that, and we do get calls, and they call and our water heater's broke. It's 6 months after the inspection, and that's probably the most difficult part of our job is we're looking at it at the day
of the inspection.
That we're there, and we don't know when something's going to,
give out.
Yeah. And so that is, I would say that's probably one of your number one,
right?
Our frustrations. I don't know if it's always a complaint, but that's why I think it's always crucial to note the age of it to the best of your ability to find out what it is and tell them how much life is left. Yeah.
No, that helps set them up for expectations, so that way they're not irritated or mad at you, so to speak, or me, because I get it too.
I mark them as fair in my report, and I tell them they're operating, and I tell them that they're getting close to the end of their life.
Right. So now, in terms of like a general home inspection, you mentioned important things like roofs. We talk about attics, foundations, equipment. Now, what about if I have a fireplace? Is that something you can look at for me?
We'll look at the enclosure itself a lot of times and make sure that the hearth is, the correct distance. But in a gas fireplace or a wood-burning fireplace, we're not going to be able to operate.
Okay.
That during the inspection. We're not bringing wood with us. We're not going to...
Are you serious?
I know. Yeah, right. We're not going to light a fire in someone's home.
Okay.
So we would typically...
Because it's not our home yet, right?
Yeah.
Still their home. Okay.
I try to get a picture of the flue. I'm going to look at the chimney from the top. If I see heavy creosote build up inside of it, I may recommend that they have it clean. But typically the recommendation is if you're going to use it and operate it, that you have a chimney sweep come out, clean it, inspect it, and make sure it's good to go, because it's a fire in your house.
Yeah, and you mentioned gas fireplaces. They're a different animal, just like a gas furnace is a different animal.
Yeah.
But what is this radon thing? Isn't that gas too?
Yeah, radon is, but it's not a gas that we make or we use in our home. So
I don't pay for it.
No, you don't pay for it. It's a
I guess I don't really want it in my house.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically an odorless, naturally occurring gas. It emits up through the ground and infiltrates the air in our home. And unfortunately, that gas is a known carcinogen. So basically, it's cancer causing. And people will be like, well, we don't have that in our area. This is funny to me. Or, no one on my street has it. Or, well, that radon. If you do your research on it, I think you'd find quite a different story. The test is relatively inexpensive. Okay. Most home inspectors are probably charging anywhere from, $125 to $200 for it, depending on the size of the home. So, that's a minimal cost.
So then you measure to see how much might be in
we're
there.
Basically going to put a monitor in the basement. It's going to run for 48 hours. It's going to take a count every 1 to 2 hours, depending on what kind you have, and it's going to come back and tell us, a result. And basically the EPA, their recommendation, we use 4 as a benchmark, 0.4 picoliters. Basically, they now say anything between 2 and 4 you should consider, because no amount of radon is a good amount of radon.
Gotcha.
It's naturally occurring. If I walk outside right now,
it'll be outside.
It's going to be outside.
I've heard that if you have a lot of moisture too outside, you might have higher.
Higher levels. I mean, basically, houses are like a stack effect. So as pressure builds or air is coming through the home, it can pull or draw more air or radon at a given time. That will occur sometimes during heavy rains, high winds.
Yeah. How do you get rid of it?
It's relatively inexpensive in comparison to most home repairs. The fix essentially is they're going to find a location in the basement typically, or a sump pump is another way that they can go in. We're basically going to put in a PVC pipe, draw the air out from underneath of the concrete. It'll have a fan somewhere in the attic or on the exterior of the home, and then we're going to discharge that air into basically above your roof line and above your attic space is the idea. Yeah, so this year I've had a lot of clients that are on the fence. They'll call me and, well, I only want to do this inspection because the seller is not making any repairs, and that puts us in a difficult situation. Of course, my job is to recommend everything to you. I'm at least going to give you the option, to do it. But this couple in Florissant, they weren't going to do it, and then their realtor talked them into it, and they called me back, and I came out and did it, and it was a very nice, very clean home.
It wasn't.
Very few, I'm going through, I'm moving quick, I'm not really finding any problems.
Sure.
I get in the attic, and for 2 foot all the way down the whole center of the ridge of the home, the plywood is rotted and there's water dripping.
Oh, water, the enemy, as stated earlier.
This particular home also, and I happened to be there on a day it was raining, had water in the electric panel.
Oh, man.
And, it had a leak on the front foundation. So they were still going to buy the home, but they went back to the seller, even though the seller said, I'm not going to make any repairs, and said, listen, we found
significant things.
Right. And they met him, on some of those repairs, but had they not done it, and they closed 3 weeks later,
they would have been really upset.
They would have been upset.
With all the water stains that have landed on the ceiling. Right.
So I say I've had 10 this year,
they've been a little bit scary.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, if you don't inspect it, you don't know.
Yeah,
right?
You're right. And the stories go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to share some of the highlights that buyers need to be thinking about. Buying a home is a huge investment, and it's something that you want them to know what they're walking into. But I think what I've always appreciated about you is that you keep it simple, and you don't get dramatic with what they're saying. You just talk about, this is what it is, this is what it's going to take to make a difference. The report might look a little different, but in all reality, it's just, this would be the approach that I would take if I was buying this home.
Yeah, so I don't have an emotional attachment to the home.
Correct.
Okay, and I don't like to, and I try to maintain that, right?
Sure.
So I try to be as calm as I can, and I may consider a smoke detector to be a bigger safety issue than water coming through a foundation. One costs more, one's a bigger safety issue.
Right, because you can live through the water coming through the foundation. Sure. The fire, that's a whole other issue. Yeah. There just wasn't enough water coming through the foundation to save me from this fire. Yeah.
So, the answer is I don't know. And if we get in, I'd say my older clients, probably
my age?
I don't know, 60 and up.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Maybe even 50 and up. I don't know. There's just they seem to be handier. They want to do more things themselves. And not to say that there's not, of course, there's younger people and people who this is what they do. But those types of clients tend to be like, I understand that I've owned a home.
Right.
This isn't a big deal. I know it's a simple fix.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Someone who's never owned a home, and you get a 40-page inspection report, and it's got 20 deficiencies on it. To them,
that's significant.
It's excessive. And so I would say 2 things if I have deals that come apart, and it's not that many. Most of the time the realtors do a good job of working the problems out and figuring it out. But when they do, when I ask them why, it's either the list was so big that I couldn't comprehend it, or there was this one thing that they couldn't
and
pass.
That makes a lot of sense. If that's how they're judging whether or not they want to move forward, one major issue or just a plethora of issues.
Yeah. It's usually one of the two.
Yeah, no, it gives me something to think about, because if I've got a big list, how can we, combine things to make it seem more reasonable for them to attack, so to speak, or to have a conversation with the seller.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a way to judge them and go, this is simple.
Sure.
We can have that conversation.
Right.